The Carney Liberals are talking about phasing out gas-powered vehicles sooner rather than later. This means before long, they may no longer be able to buy a new diesel work truck or even a smaller fuel-efficient car just for getting around town. The News Forum's Western Canada Bureau Chief Hal Roberts chatted with Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, to discuss why many in the West may have a problem with that.
Chris, having the Liberals phase out gas and diesel powered vehicles by the year 2035 really doesn't sit well with many you've spoken to, including our farmers and ranchers, correct?
That's correct, because of course, everybody should be able to choose what kind of vehicle they want to purchase and drive. Number one. Number two, we don't have the money for this, Hal. We don't have the money for this. We don't have the energy for this. And to your point exactly, out here out west, farmers and ranchers, they can't exactly do their work on their land with an electric vehicle. At least not yet, at least not for many, many decades in the future. And so this is why the Taxpayers Federation, we're sounding the alarm saying this thing is a non starter.
Now, the federal government says all new light duty cars and passenger trucks must be zero emissions over the next 10 years, but the wheels are actually in motion to make that happen right now?
Yes, exactly. It's too easy for folks to imagine, oh, that's a decade from now. No, it's not. The restrictions start kicking in about 5 months. So by 2026, dealers will need to have a certain percentage of their sales of new vehicles to be battery powered vehicles. And we have to stress this. This isn't hybrids. This has to be 100% battery powered vehicles. Now, the moment that the government gets involved in sales, things start getting messy, because what happens then when the dealership isn't selling these battery powered vehicles that people aren't buying? They start stockpiling up there, right? Keep having stock around they can't sell. There's actually going to be a weird, complicated credit system that these dealerships are going to have to get involved in with the federal government. It's a real mess.
Now, let's change gears for just a moment here, Chris. You're with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. What are your thoughts on Premier Daniel Smith's recent announcement that provincial income taxes will be cut? How much will this actually save Albertans?
This will save Albertans big money. A lot of folks who move to Alberta from a place like British Columbia, for example, in previous times would have been surprised that actually there's a bigger bite coming out of their paycheck. You're like, hey, what gives? Why is this smaller? Well, up until the other day, Alberta's income tax bracket for the lowest amount was actually pretty high. We were charging people 10% provincial income tax, all the way up to $140,000 worth of earnings. So that was catching lots of people, everybody from police to plumbers, teachers, you name it. That's changing. So they're now reducing that lower tax bracket down to 8% for the first $60,000 worth of earnings. And that's going to save the average two-person working family about $1,500 per year.
Every penny counts. That's wonderful. Now, Chris, the Alberta government also announced a nice surplus for 2024. Instead of a projected surplus of around 335 million, it turned out to be a little bit higher at 8.3 billion dollars. Was that mainly due to or thanks to the energy sector, or were some other factors at work here?
Energy sector was a big factor. Also, so many people moved to Alberta, Hal, right? Alberta is calling. That's really working. We've seen so many people voting with their wallets and their feet, moving to Alberta from inside of Canada, not just new immigration, but from inside of Canada. So people from places like Ontario, British Columbia, even the Maritimes. And what that does is when they've got a good job or if they've started a business, that increases the amount of income tax that the provincial government takes in and business taxes. So they kind of had a bit of extra riches kicking around at the end of the year, combined with our oil and gas revenue. I want to stress, though, that that was for the year 2024. That's for fiscal year end. It's basically like finishing the last chapter in a book. So, yes, we finished off 2024 with a bigger surplus than a lot of us had known. But this coming year, Finance Minister Nate Horner is still projecting that they're going to be going into the red, that they're still going to be piling on more debt here in Alberta.
Really? Because I thought maybe with a surplus like that, they'd be looking at paying off some of the debt, or maybe even think about taking off the provincial fuel tax at the pumps once again.
That's a great question, and we were hoping the same thing. Here's what's happening. Under the current regulations, which are great, the Taxpayer Protection Act, you're right. They're going to take 50% of that cash surplus that they had for fiscal year 2024, plunk that down onto the debt. They're also going to be making a big cash down payment into our Heritage Fund, which is great. But going forward, Finance Minister Nate Horner is so worried about the current trade war with the United States, potential tariffs on our energy, that they're really banking on a low amount of return for our natural resources. So they're estimating to have a very low cost for a barrel of oil per barrel. And so they're guesstimating that they're going to run a pretty big deficit in the billions of dollars. So hopefully all of these projections are wrong. And at the end of fiscal year 2025, we have another surplus that we can plunk down onto the debt.
Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.